Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Marissa Waterman, and I'm the Marketing Director here at the Academy. Today's webinar is titled Planning and Execution of the Los Angeles Groundwater Replenishment Project. Our Executive Director, Dr. Daniel Other, will serve as the moderator and will introduce our three speakers today. During the presentation, you'll be able to submit a question by clicking on the Q&A icon on the bottom of your screen. Before we get started, Dr. Other would like to say a few words. Dan, how are you?
Marissa, thank you so much. I'm doing fantastic. I'm really excited to be here today. As we begin, let me offer a special thanks to our patrons. These are firms and utilities that financially support the work we do at the Academy. We are grateful for their support. In particular, I want to say thank you and congratulations to the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Thanks for being a patron and congratulations for this project. The project that we're going to hear about today won the 2023 Excellence in Environmental Engineering and Science Competition Grand Prize in the category of planning. And today we have an update on a project that represents decades in the making. This is an example of how we manage water in places where scarcity of resources and demand for basic services create a strain on the environment. This represents an opportunity for environmental engineers and science to practice our craft to the limits of our capability to ensure public health while protecting the environment. Today, we're joined by three exceptional engineers who will be explaining planning and execution of the Los Angeles Groundwater Replenishment Project. It's an honor for me to introduce Andrew Hahn, Sebastian Rousseau, and Michael Bustillo-Sakai. Andrew completed his education at UCLA and USC. He's a professional engineer in California, and he's currently employed as a civil engineering associate with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Sebastian completed his education at UC Irvine and Cal State Fullerton. He's an EIT in California, and he currently serves as a civil engineering associate with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Michael completed his education at UC Berkeley. He's a professional engineer in California, and he is currently employed as a civil engineering associate with the Los Angeles Department of Power and Water and Power. Today, we're going to hear from each of these speakers. We'll begin with Andrew, we'll move on to Sebastian, and we'll conclude with Michael. And finally, I'll return at the end of this presentation to lead a moderated discussion. As a reminder to all, please place your questions in the Q&A function. I'll be reading them throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait until the end. You can put them in the Q&A throughout the presentation. And then together, I'll pull those questions as well as my own, and I will have a moderated discussion at the end. Andrew, Sebastian, Michael, we are excited to have you here with us. And Andrew, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. We're excited to be here. Good afternoon and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. My name is Andrew Hahn. I'm currently serving as the Department of Water and Power's project manager for the LA Groundwater Replenishment Project. With me, as Dan mentioned, we have Michael Bustillo-Sakai and Sebastian Rousseau, both serving as project engineers on the project as well. We're excited to present and share with you on our project. The project is the City of LA's first potable reuse project, and it creates a new, safe, sustainable, and drought-resilient drinking water supply for the city. And the project is also a major step in achieving 100% reuse of the available wastewater within the city. But before diving into the presentation, I did want to thank the Academy and the Selection Committee for awarding the Grand Prize in Planning for the project. The city has invested considerable resources and effort over decades, as Dan has mentioned, through our dedicated staff at the Department of Water and Power, our partner LA Sanitation and Environment, and all of our consultants and technical experts. And I'm excited for the recognition that they'll be receiving for their dedication to building a sustainable Los Angeles. I'll quickly start us off by providing you with a brief project overview and history, and then I'll let Sebastian and Michael take you through the project itself from the sewer shed all the way to the spreading basins. So the LAGWR project is located within the San Fernando Valley area of the city of Los Angeles, and the project will construct a new advanced water purification facility, or an AWPF, at the Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, which is owned and operated by our partners at LA Sanitation and Environment. The Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant, or DCT as we'll refer to it throughout the presentation, is shown in green on the bottom left-hand corner of the map in front of you. The purified recycled water from the new AWPF will be conveyed through existing pipeline across the San Fernando Valley to the Hansing spreading grounds, which you see in blue, in the map in front of you. And the Hanson Spreading Grounds are owned and operated by our partners at the LA County Department of Public Works and the LA County Flood Control District. And at the Hanson Spreading Grounds, the project will spread 21,000 acre-feet per year of advanced purified drinking water from the AWPF, and this will be a new drinking water supply for 250,000 city residents. Once spread at the Hanson Spreading Grounds, the advanced purified recycled water will replenish the San Fernando groundwater basin. And as many of you within the audience are aware, the city of Los Angeles and Southern California as a whole has historically relied much on imported water sources. And of the local water supply sources available to the city, groundwater is paramount. And of the groundwater basins available to the city, the San Fernando groundwater basin is the city's principal groundwater resource. The San Fernando groundwater basin is capable of providing up to 23% of the city's total water supply during dry periods. Therefore, replenishment of this basin is critical in increasing resilience of our local water supply. Now, the concept of groundwater replenishment for the city of Los Angeles is not necessarily new. In the 1990s, the city pursued the East Valley Water Recycling Project. And at its core, this project in the 90s looked very similar to our LHWR project. We were going to take water from DCT, convey it across the San Fernando Valley, and spread it at the Hanson Spreading Grounds. And in fact, we actually finished construction of the East Valley project. And the conveyance pipeline that I mentioned earlier and showed you in that map is the same pipeline that was constructed in the 90s. However, before we could even spread a single drop of water from the East Valley project, the project was embroiled in the politics of a mayoral campaign. And the project was hit with article after article opposing the project. And the project was ultimately shut down. So the city went back to the drawing board. And over the course of over a decade, we performed a series of studies, pilots, and planning reports in conjunction with extensive outreach and stakeholder engagement that established the LAGWR project to what it is today, a potable reuse project that goes above and beyond regulatory requirements to ensure public health and trust. And to further solidify that trust of the public, the city also engaged extensively within an independent advisory panel. This panel was first convened in 2010 before regulations were even available to the department. But we've continued to engage with the IAP over the years and will continue to do so as the project progresses. And this engagement with the expert panel is something that we've leaned on heavily with our outreach and stakeholder engagement to make sure that we're getting as much support and buy-in from the community and our stakeholders for the project as early as we can. Now, with the planning complete, the LHWR project is in design, and the project is being implemented via progressive design build, with Jacobs serving as our primary progressive design build contractor. And as mentioned, the project is being implemented as a partnership between LADWP and LA Sanitation and Environment, and we're supported by our owner's agent team consisting of Curlo Engineers, Trusted Technologies, Woodard & Curran, and Hazen & Sawyer. And now with that general overview of where we are now and how we got here, I'll hand it over to Sebastian and Michael to take you through the finer points of the project itself.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrew. And before I progress too much further, I just want to take stock of our acronyms because we're going to be using them extensively. And of course, acronyms are a large part of the learning curve for any project. So we've discussed the Donald C. Tillman Water Reclamation Plant. That's the existing plant. We're referring to that as DCT. And then our advanced water purification facility that's at the heart of this project, or the AWPF. So in this section, I'll be diving into improvements being made at DCT in preparation for our AWPF. So on a previous slide, Andrew showed a map of the San Fernando Basin, and that was very focused on showing the groundwater basin. Here we're looking at the San Fernando Valley again, but we're looking at it instead as a sewer shed. Why? Well, the sewer shed feeds DCT, and it's DCT that feeds our AWPF. And here on this map, I just want to point out, because it's going to become relevant in later slides, that the thicker red lines here are the sort of main lines, the trunk lines for the sewer system. And you'll notice that DCT exists at a confluence of these lines, but that they also continue on past DCT. And that's because DCT is a scalping plant, but we'll talk more about that in upcoming slides. So now we've zoomed in from the entire San Fernando Valley to just the site of DCT itself. We can see DCT in blue and the AWPF in red. So let's talk about the treatment processes at DCT very briefly. DCT has primary treatment, primary clarification, followed by secondary treatment. That's a conventional activated sludge, followed by clarification. Then it has tertiary filtration and chlorine contact tanks. And so as scientists and engineers, many of us are probably building that process flow diagram in our heads right now. We see the water coming through DCT, going through primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment. And at that point, it departs to the AWPF for further treatment. So the first improvement that we made at DCT was to drive additional flow to DCT. And that's because influent to DCT is of course, proportional to effluent coming out of DCT, and that is the influent for the AWPF. So by increasing influent to DCT, we're effectively increasing the effluent coming out of it and increasing the capacity of our AWPF. And we like that. We want to produce as much recycled water, as much purified water as possible. And this slide details exactly how we went about doing that, but let's pause for a second. We're again looking at that satellite image of DCT. That's what's in the background. And then these lines overlaid are the sewer trunk lines that we were looking at earlier. So here we have AVORs and EVIS. And the way that DCT functions is it's a scalping plant. This is somewhat unique, although it's very typical for our area here in Los Angeles and Southern California. So this plant can choose to divert and treat or bypass and not treat. And that's because down the line or downstream, there's a terminal treatment plant. In this case, that would be Hyperion. So this effort involved maximizing diversion to DCT and minimizing bypass. It yielded 5 MGD of flow. And to put that in perspective, that's almost double all of the recycled water delivered in the valley in 2022. So a fairly significant number for us. With this additional flow being driven to the plant and with the upcoming AWPF, all of that necessitates new equalization. And we can see a rendering of the EQ basins here on the right. They're pre-stressed concrete and mostly below grade. But why do we need this equalization specifically? Well, that's because flow varies diurnally coming into this water reclamation plant, but the AWPF, especially because we want to maximize utilization, really necessitates even flow. And so what these EQ basins will do, if we take a look at this plot on the left, there's a horizontal line, and that represents the daily average. Any volume of flow coming into the plant above that daily average will actually be diverted to the EQ basins and therein stored. And then when flow falls below that daily average, in this case 54 MGD, the EQ basins will release flow into the plant, creating nice even flow throughout the plant, which has its benefits, and nice even flow downstream into our AWPF. So another DCT improvement is the idea of optimization. Now, why are we interested in optimizing unit processes within DCT? I'm going to take us back to our very simple and schematic visual here. So let's think about influent as steady. We're not varying that. Let's examine the relationship between waste flows and effluent coming out of the plant. If you have significant waste flows, you're going to, let's say, have an average amount of effluent coming out of the plant. But if you can minimize these waste flows, you're going to maximize the amount of effluent coming out of the plant and therefore into the AWPF. So let's be a bit more specific. Let's talk about the actual effort that we got engaged in here. So this was a great effort. We have many agencies collaborated on this. On the right in this photo, we have Richard Sutherland from the DCT engineering staff representing LA San, myself on the left representing DWP, and then of course we had engineers present from Jacobs as well. And what we're doing there is we're handling a sprayer system, a sort of prototype that we created to help optimize scum removal in the secondary clarifiers. So as a scalping plant, there's been no driver historically to optimize and conserve flows within the plant. But now it's in our best interest to do so. So this effort actually allowed us to save about an MGD of water. And what that specifically means is about 1 million gallons per day of water was going to go into the sewer system, but now instead that's going to continue on throughout the plant and ultimately make its way to the AWPF. So put in other terms, this will save the city of Los Angeles about $1 million per year. But enough about DCT, let's talk about the star of the show, the Advanced Water Purification Facility. So we've seen the slide before, but I just wanted to bring it up again so we can kind of keep the sense of context, right? We've spoken about DCT, we've spoken about the treatment trains. Now all of that flow is going to the AWPF, which is situated at the back end of the plant. And here's a beautiful rendering of what the building for the AWPF will look like. But of course, as scientists and engineers, we're probably much more interested on the treatment train within. So let's talk about that. So the treatment train being used here is known as full advanced treatment, or FAT, and that's associated with another bunch of acronyms, MF, RO, and UVAOP. So let's unpack those one at a time. The first is microfiltration. That can filter out suspended solids, organics, and pathogens. And really its purpose is to prevent fouling of the much more finely pored downstream reverse osmosis membranes. Now, where microfiltration is capable of filtering out suspended solids, the RO membranes can actually filter out dissolved solids, including critically contaminant of emerging concern, PFAS. And then we kind of have the star of the show, the ultraviolet advanced oxidation. The way this works is that we dose an oxidant, in this case, sodium hypochlorite, on the way into the chamber. Once in the chamber, it's being bombarded with energy in the form of UV light. This forms very short-lived hydroxyl radicals that are very, very reactive, and they drive the inactivation of any remaining pathogens, as well as the destruction of CECs. And I'm going to round this out with my favorite drawing from this from the project. So this is a nice isometric drawing of the internals of the entire treatment train of the AWPF. And we can see here all the things that we've just discussed. We've got the microfiltration, followed by the reverse osmosis, and finally the ultraviolet advanced oxidation process. And we've been talking a lot about the science involved here, but it's very important to speak about the science to the broader public. And so we have a public learning center that's central to the facility. You know, getting rid of some of the stigma and really educating the public about what's happening here, and maybe inspiring the next generation of process and water resource engineers who can take up this good work once we all retire, are all possible in this space. So speaking of retirement, this is going to conclude my portion of the presentation, but I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Michael Bustillo-Sakai.
Hey, thanks, Sebastian. That was a wonderful walkthrough of the AWPF, and thanks, Andrew, for giving us the overview of the project. So now I'll be presenting on some of the more downstream aspects of the project. So we walked through the DCT, the AWPF. Now imagine that the purified recycled water is treated, left the AWPF, been conveyed, and now is arriving at the Hansen spreading grounds. So the Hansen Spreading Grounds, like Andrew mentioned earlier, is owned and operated by the County Public Works. And so these spreading grounds are located in the eastern San Fernando Valley. And its primary function is to infiltrate impounded stormwater that's captured behind dams in the mountains surrounding the San Fernando Valley. So once that stormwater is impounded behind those dams to prevent flooding in the area, then the county discharges it into several spreading basins around the San Fernando Valley to infiltrate into the groundwater basin. So there are improvements that are required at Hansen Spreading Grounds in order to discharge purified recycled water at this location. And so the objective of these improvements is to increase operational flexibility to allow water to be discharged into different locations in the spreading basin, and also to have flow monitoring and control at this location, because County Public Works will be discharging the water and controlling where it goes into the basin. We want to make sure that they can have the flexibility to operate around their regular maintenance and any basins that do not have available capacity for recycled water. So these spreading ground improvements include connecting and refurbishing an existing outlet. So outlet 1 is the legacy outlet from the East Valley Recycled Water Project a few decades ago. It's probably older than I am. And so that's going to be the first part there. The second facet here is a new outlet lower down into the basin. And so that'll allow for water to be discharged into basins that may not be full of stormwater or may need to be drying or may need to be dried to manage vector control. And then finally, a new vault with flow meter and control valve will be installed to be able to divert the flow between either outlet. So before the water can actually be discharged here at Hanson Spreading Grounds, we need to have regulatory approval. And so I'll be talking about regulatory approval specifically for recycled water. So in California, you may hear the shorthand Title 22 thrown around a lot when talking about recycled water. So those are the regulations that govern discharge and use of recycled water for potable reuse in the state, as well as, for potable reuse. And so the agencies that enforce those regulations include the State Water Resources Control Board and also the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. So the regional board has a service area that roughly covers southern Los Angeles County and the majority of Ventura County. And so the State Water Board is charged with protecting public health and also regulating drinking water systems, while the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board, or I'll just be referring to them as the regional board, actually protects surface water quality and groundwater quality. They write permits on behalf of the California EPA and the US EPA for any kind of industrial discharge or wastewater discharge into the area. So State Water Board provides a lot of technical support to the regional board in the specifics of recycled water use, and a lot of their recommendations get written into the permits that we work with, that we are provided by the regional board. So in order to have this project go into operation and produce recycled water and discharge recycled water, there's a lot of coordination that needs to be done with these agencies. So if you remember back to the timeline with the IAP, going back to 2010, there was a lot of coordination with the regulators and the independent advisory panel. And then now I want to focus on just the coordination that is going to take part the coordination that is going to be conducted as part of the project itself. So just to give you the lay of the land here, in blue on the bottom, I have the different phases of the project. So we have the design, construction, and the online date for the AWPF. And then on the top, I've highlighted some important documents and timelines for coordinating with DDW and DDW, the Division of Drinking Water, that is a subset of the State Water Resources Control Board. Sorry, forgot to mention them earlier. And also the Regional Water Quality Board. So in green, we have all of the State Water Board, DDW coordination, and then in orange, some of the work that we have to do with the regional board. So to date, since March 2023, working on LEGWR design, we've been working on compiling our Title 22 engineering report. And so that was submitted, our first draft, in October of this year. And that report essentially contains all of the information on how we are going to meet the regulatory requirements for producing purified recycled water and discharging at the Hanson Spreading Grounds. And that'll probably go through a few rounds of submission and feedback before we receive a conditional approval from the state. And so that conditional approval will allow the regional board to then begin writing our permit for discharge and lay out all of the requirements for monitoring and reporting and operations and what to do in the case of any mishaps. We'll also need to be developing a tracer test plan, which will certify the results of any groundwater modeling that we have to do for this groundwater replenishment project. And then we'll also develop an operation optimization plan, which details a lot of the operations, monitoring, reporting at the plant. And finally, once all of that is all wrapped up, hopefully at the early time of construction in 2026, then once the facility is totally constructed, we can have regulatory testing and validation, and then finally actually execute our tracer test plan for about a year after the project is in operation. So you can see that's about 6 years of regulatory involvement on top of the decades of other coordination that has already been a part of this project. And it's all essential towards maintaining public health and also having an effective project. So now I'd like to talk a little more about some of the other aspects of the regulatory approval, and so that's with groundwater basin modeling. So this is a groundwater replenishment project. San Fernando Basin is integral part of this project. So as that water infiltrates from the Hansen spreading grounds, it'll travel into the aquifer, and then we'll extract it at drinking water wells down gradient. So a groundwater model is important because we need to find out three things, or we need to be able to assure ourselves of three different things. So we want to know the retention time in the basin, because that allows us to determine pathogen removal and inactivation, and then also meet requirements for minimum retention time that are imposed by the state. So if we can reach a minimum of about 6 months of groundwater retention, we can get removal credit for virus, Giardia, and cryptosporidium, and also we will be allowed to extract the water and use it for potable reuse. Now, the final item here is we want to make sure that we're not impacting any ongoing remediation efforts in the San Fernando Basin. So I have this cartoon contaminant plume here in between the replenished water and the drinking water basin. So the eastern San Fernando Valley has a lot of legacy groundwater contamination from industrial activities, and so the state board and lots of other parties have been involved in remediation efforts and designing remediation facilities, and we want to be certain that this 21,000 acre feet of water that is being introduced into the groundwater basin is not going to impact any of those remediation efforts. So I included here some snapshots of the groundwater basin modeling to show you some of the figures that the State Water Board is interested in looking at. So just to give you the lay of the land here, we have the Hansen spreading grounds, and then our extraction wells in blue. And then we have this very important Verdugo fault zone that is a very important subsurface structure that actually alters and has a lot of influence over the travel of water in the subsurface. And you'll notice that there's these different colors for the particle tracks. And so that is representative of the different stratigraphic layers that the water is traveling through. So we're planning on starting replenishment late 2027, early 2028 for the sake of this modeling. And you can see after about 6 months and a year, some of the water has traveled across this Verdugo fault zone, and some of it has actually been blocked and is traveling south, not towards the extraction wells, but along the gradient of this fault zone. And so if we fast forward a little bit in time, you see after about 2 years, we have particle tracks that are nearing our extraction wells, and we have some water that has just broken across this subsurface structure. And after about 5 years, you can see that a lot of water has begun to be extracted at the Tahunga wells, and the Rinaldi Toluca wells are near the groundwater plume, recycled water plume, sorry. And I included here that we have about a 28-month estimated arrival time from the Hansen spreading grounds to the nearest well. So that's our first arrival. That's not like an average of the particle tracks. So going a little further in time, after about 10 years, we can see that a lot of the water has begun to be captured at the extraction wells. And at 25 years, about 95%, 98% of all the water that is infiltrated will actually be extracted by wells, with only a small percentage remains in transit. So injection wells, why are we talking about injection wells? I thought we were talking about surface spreading and the Hansen spreading grounds. Well, there's one small issue with this project where one small challenge with this project where the Hansen spreading grounds is not owned by DWP. It's owned by the public works, by the county public works, and their primary function is to impound stormwater. So there are seasons, and there is the potential for extremely wet seasons where there is no available capacity at the Hansen spreading grounds. So if anybody here in California can recall this past winter where we saw record rain and record snowpack, there was no available capacity at Hansen spreading grounds for a couple months. So that means about 2 months where we can't spread any purified recycled water from the AWPF. So that has lots of operational impacts. We also want to maximize the amount of water that we're producing and infiltrating so that we can have a resilient water supply here in Los Angeles. So the solution here is to install injection wells that we can use either seasonally or year round. And so the department has never utilized injection wells to replenish groundwater before. So we are embarking on a years-long injection well pilot, and hopefully it will hopefully graduate into an actual injection well field where we can inject water from the groundwater replenishment project. As you can see, I highlighted here the groundwater level at about 250 feet below the ground surface. So there's a lot of available capacity in the basin, presumably for us to be able to store this water and not have any impacts to the shallow groundwater here. And that water is going to be injected about 400, 500 to 1,000 feet below ground surface, which is the area that most of our extraction wells pull water from. And so the regulatory aspects here will likely have to be repeated for this new discharge of the recycled water. And so this will essentially repeat a lot of the coordination and make it such that this project can utilize all of its water at any point in time. So thank you all for following through here with me. I'm going to pass it back over to Andrew to take us home.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sebastian. So now we've shown you all this work that we have done and need to do, frankly, throughout the San Fernando Valley. So now you're probably asking the question that we ask, or we get asked by the public all the time: how long is it going to take to do all this, and how long is it going to how much is it going to cost us? So the project is currently within the design phase, with the big ticket item, the AWPF that we've talked about, dominating the schedule. And with everything on schedule as it is currently, we'll start at 3 years of construction for the AWPF at the end of 2024. And by the end of 2027, the AWPF and all the supporting facilities that we talked about will complete construction. So in 2028, we'll be producing advanced purified recycled water and replenishing the San Fernando Basin. And in all the work that we talked about at DCT, at the AWPF, and at the Hansen Spreading Grounds, all this will cost just over $700 million. Now, I won't go into the immediate project benefits of this all over again, but I did want to take a step back and highlight for you what this means for the city and its 40-year recycled water program, and frankly, why we're so excited about this project. This project represents a doubling of the city's existing recycled water program. This is the largest recycled water project the city has tackled to date. But this won't be our largest for long. And that takes us to reason number 2. The LAGWR project is a major step by the city into potable reuse, and it sets the stage for another City of LA initiative that you may have heard of, Operation Next, which at completion will be the largest potable reuse project in the state of California. And the lessons learned from the LAGWR project will feed into a stronger Operation Next. And as I mentioned, this is just a first step for the city, and we have a lot of work and innovation that'll be required of us in the years to come. So we're always looking to the industry on how we can learn and improve as we move towards a successful LAGWR project and a greater Operation Next. And Dan, Marissa, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do this during the presentation, but if you'd like to partner and collaborate with us, please reach out. We're excited at the prospect of learning from and contributing to the AAEES community. Thank you so much for your time. I'll hand it back to you, Dan.
Andrew, thank you. Sebastian, Michael, fantastic presentation. Lots of great questions in there. I had some in my mind. Colleagues have put them in the Q&A, and I just want to kind of paint them in broad categories, and then we can come back and kind of pick them off. So starting at a high level, one of the questions that was really around there might be thought about in terms of like overall water budget for Southern California, right? So how does this particular project impact on the overall imported water budget? So, people were kind of curious about that. And then at the level of the DCT, by diverting to water recycle, what's the impact on the LA River? And so that's kind of in the, in the overall, hydraulics of the whole system kind of question. Then there were some questions that got a little bit more into perhaps kind of this kind of technical space about kind of what's next and how do we plan as engineers. And so there was a question about a comparison, right? Like there's a lot of work going into this recycling, but how does that compare just to doing direct desalination, right? So there are other options of places to get water. Was there any plan to do any recycling from Hyperion, and what does that look like, and how does the work that's going on at DCT play into the rest of the facilities there in the basin, in the sewer shed? And then, of course, one of the questions that came up, which you alluded to there at the end, Andrew, is the direct potable reuse, right? So Project Next, and so people are kind of curious how that fit in. I had that on my list of questions, but you have invited people to engage with you on that broader one as well. There was a specific technical question at the AWPF, where's the brine going to go and how's that going to be managed? As you might imagine, as we think about emerging pollutants and those all appearing, in brine, what do we do with that? There was a question around how do we protect the Hansen spreading ground? So Michael, you had talked about this a little bit with the injection wells when there's a lot of water there and it's very wet, you've got to figure out how you're going to inject your water. But help us understand a little bit more how that spreading grounds is protected in general. Are there industrial setbacks to the groundwater shed, as it were, to preserve that? I think a lot of us are thinking kind of, the East Palestine and what went on there. And okay, so stuff spills, and then where does that end up in terms of groundwater? So help us understand how the Hansen spreading ground is protected, near term as well as long term. And then a little bit more of a general question, because we do have students that are engaged with watching these and faculty use these for student talks. So how do students engage? Like what do you do as a student to be prepared so that you can do these kind of projects when you get out and work, right? This is a really different than kind of the punch some numbers into Excel. And what's changed in the public views, right? I mean, if many years ago, this all got kind of embroiled in a mayoral debate and, has the public just simply moved on or forgotten? And is there any concern that suddenly those issues that were there in the past get brought forward? So those are the kind of the range of questions to take on. Maybe what we'll do is kind of start up at the top and thinking about that water quantity issue. So, how does what you're talking about here fit into the overall water budget and, the imported water in the region? And how about the removal from DCT and to recycle? How does that impact the LA River?
Yeah, my apologies. If we could start with the technical AWPF question.
Oh,
Sebastian actually has a short conflict, so I did want to
we'll
have a
do it.
chance to
We'll
discuss
do it.
that first.
Yeah. Fantastic, Andrew. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So Sebastian, let me just rephrase this a little bit. So one of the technical questions at the AWPF was the brine. You've got an MF, then you've got an RO, and then you're going to do advanced oxidation. Of course, there's going to be brine produced from those membranes. What's going to happen with that?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, and thank you for the person who asked. And I love the technical side of this project. But overall, the entire AWPF operates at an 80% recovery rate, right? So 20% is going into the sewer as brine. The RO itself is operating at 85%. And I kind of answered that second question already, but that brine is going into the sewer. So as a scalping plant, DCT actually doesn't do any biosolids management. It actually puts its biosolids into the sewer as well. And these all travel downhill to the terminal treatment plant Hyperion. So with the relatively small amount of brine and the fact that this is already standard practice, that's just going to go ahead and travel down to Hyperion as well.
And does that affect the regulation? I mean, I would imagine now suddenly in a sense that, the what's coming out is almost like an industrial waste from a regulation standpoint. Does it matter? Or since you're already part of the system, it's okay to kind of pull some water out, clean it up, and then dump what's bad back in? Or does that have a regulatory implication?
Fortunately, it does not. So the existing permit already covers biosolids. So if you think of waste activated sludge, also pretty concentrated, right? So that's already making its way into the sewer. We have thought through with the consultants just any kind of precipitation that might happen, but we've designed around that. And of course, that's about CO2 off-gassing, and then we're really getting into the weeds. But the plant already operates in this fashion, and the broader sewer shed and the terminal treatment plant Hyperion already accommodates this.
Fantastic. That's helpful. And maybe we're in this technical space. I don't know if it's comfortable for you to manage this one, but any thoughts relative to desal versus recycle, because that's essentially in this space of thinking membranes as well. So
yeah, the previous studies that Andrew showed up front in this presentation really focused on a variety of treatment trains that could be used, but we were already headed in this direction, not towards desalination. Oh, there is also the fact that, you know, this is in Van Nuys, right? This is in the valley. So we're really looking to recoup this untapped resource from the sewer shed there. But I'll definitely, you know, open the floor on that question to Andrew and Michael as well.
I do want to expand on what Sebastian mentioned about that Van Nuys portion. With the map that we showed at the San Fernando Valley, I wish we could also show the elevation difference between sea level and where the valley is. So that the cost of desalination, treatment costs aside, the pumping costs from sea level all the way up to the San Fernando Valley was going to be substantial for us. So there was a big effort by the city to really maximize within the San Fernando Valley itself and maximize reuse there before hitting into anything like desalination for the city.
That makes sense. I appreciate that one. So if you're comfortable with it, maybe we'll move back up and kind of, you know, track it from the level of water quantity and then drop it down through. So at that quantity level, what's the impact of this particular recycle on the whole idea of imported water with Southern California in general, right? Can you speak to that you know, big water quantity issue, as well as then the specific one, you know, what's going on with the LA River relative to pulling water out at DCT and what's being discharged?
Definitely. So starting with that overall big water budget picture, as excited as we are about this project and how big it is for the city, quite frankly, for a city of 4 million residents, it's not a silver bullet for us. And what it is it's a part of a diversified portfolio for us. And that's something that the city has really pursued over the years with investments in stormwater conservation, groundwater remediation, and this replenishment project to make sure that we have a diversified portfolio where we're not heavily dependent on one single source of water. That's going to be critical for us as we go into a future that's more driven by climate change issues. These swings in hydrology within our imported water sources become a lot more greater, and that diversified portfolio helps us be able to mitigate those swings quite a bit.
Makes sense. And then any thoughts on the impact on the LA River as you pull water out at DCT and it doesn't have an effluent hitting the LA River? Is that any thoughts on creating difficulties there?
Yeah, so at the moment, a lot of the efforts that Sebastian had gone into about maximizing flow to DCT and the improvements of the efficiencies of the process, so far a lot of the numbers that we've shown you and the efforts are not really taking water out of the river. We're just diverting more flow to DCT. We're really maximizing the full capacity of what DCT can treat. There is an ongoing study and discussion with stakeholders and the regional board to discuss what reduced flows to the river could look like. But we are very early in the process, and it's something that we're looking at and exploring for maximizing reuse within the San Fernando Valley. But we're very early on in the process. But yeah, much of the flows that you're seeing, the capacities that we're talking about, we're looking at the maximizing of flow to DCT and improving processes within the plant itself.
Excellent. Thanks, Andrew. Maybe if I might move on to one that might grab a little bit more from where you had presented some with yours as well, Michael. You know, the idea of the Hansen spreading grounds, right? And if you I think you did a really nice job explaining some of the issues associated with the groundwater modeling and the remediation that's already active in the valley in general affecting the groundwater supply. But if you can talk a little bit more about those spreading grounds in particular, you know, short term, long term, you know, how are they managed and how are they protected so that they can accomplish these kind of multiple objectives that you're trying to do, a water quantity issue, a water quality issue, a remediation issue. If you can speak to that a little bit further.
Yeah, Dan, thanks for the question. So it's a very complicated topic, right? We're exploring the groundwater basin, which no person has ever seen before, and we're using the computer to try and predict what will happen in this unknown realm. So the groundwater model that we use has been calibrated for about 30 years of data, and has been used in the remediation efforts as well as other planning efforts in the San Fernando Basin. So throughout our modeling, we've shown that there should be minimal to no impact to any of the remediation efforts. A lot of the planning around the remediation already took into account groundwater recharge because this planning has been going on for a couple decades now. So with regards to the Hansen spreading grounds itself, so they've been infiltrating stormwater since about 1940, 1945, around that time. So there's a lot of stormwater that's been traveling through that area, and so there are seasons where there's a lot of water coming down. There's seasons where not very much. I think the most amount of water that it's ever seen infiltrated in 1 year is somewhere between 30 and 40,000 acre feet per year, and so our volume, 20,000 acre feet, is 21,000 acre feet is below that max. So we don't anticipate there being very large impacts to the groundwater. I saw there was some question also about fault activation in the Q&A, and considering that this volume of water falls within the range of historical infiltration in the area, we don't really think that that should cause any kind of problem.
Okay.
So protection, I guess, and like water quality.
Yeah, I was going to
Go
say
ahead.
there was another one in the chat that was kind of, that was asking about kind of, potential groundwater, potential ground corrosion in a sense, right? You're putting in this kind of, it's almost like you're injecting drinking water into the ground, right? And so that might, grab a lot of the minerals out. And so, yeah, I thought I would jump in and ask that, since you seem to be in that space with thinking about the groundwater.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So if you think about it, stormwater is actually pretty pure. It's very, very low in TDS, and the county has been infiltrating stormwater for about 80 years. So we would think that the purified recycled water is very similar in water quality to that stormwater. If anything, it has a higher TDS or a higher alkalinity because of all of the chemicals that we'll be putting back into it to stabilize it. So we shouldn't really be seeing any kind of impacts or leaching of any contaminants or minerals back into the water after it infiltrates into the groundwater basin.
Appreciate that. Thanks. And then you were going to talk a little bit, I think, a little bit more broadly about how is the Hansen spreading ground protected? I mean, is there like industrial setbacks? Are there, do you think about kind of the groundwater shed and where permits are allowed or not allowed so that area gets protected? Or
so there, let's see. So I'm not really so certain about any kind of specifics of like industrial setbacks. The area around it does have some commercial activity. There's also some residences nearby. There are other kinds of active permit sites that are regulated by the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and so they're tasked with protecting groundwater quality, and there's a lot of self-monitoring that has to be done in accordance with that. But as far as any kind of source water protection for the drinking water, so once the water is infiltrated, we actually do have a mandated radius around the Hansen spreading grounds where no wells are allowed to be drilled. So nobody can extract any water from around in that area to make sure that nobody is extracting purified water that hasn't been retained for enough time in the groundwater basin.
Interesting, because that kind of goes to one, a little bit in the technical questions of some of the ones in the chat, is kind of, can you just sell this water, right? In other words, as opposed to kind of putting it back in the ground and then kind of letting somebody else pull it out. So there is actually some limitation on other folks basically kind of grabbing this resource while it's there in the ground.
Right, that's correct. That's correct. Also, within the LADWP service area, nobody is allowed to drill any kind of private wells unless they're for some other non-drinking use, so a non-potable use. There are some non-potable wells that are in the area that are within that zone, but it's not really a concern with the state regulators here. And yeah, to that comment about just selling the water, well, the water needs to go into the ground and needs to be retained for the 6 months, for at least that minimum amount of time before it can actually be used based on the regulations.
Fantastic. Appreciate that. Thanks so much, Michael. So, and this would be, to either of you, I mean, of course, happy to have either of you jump in, but there was that, one of the questions was, recycling basin wide, right? So like recycling from Hyperion, thinking about next, Andrew, if you can, or Michael, either of you kind of speak to that a little bit in terms of, the direct potable reuse, those kind of issues, and where this thing is going in the future in terms of what you're learning from this project and how that'll feed into the next project. Can you speak to that a little bit about the next future beyond this future?
Definitely. So LA Sanitation and Environment operates 4 plants within their service area. And out of those 4 plants, we are pursuing recycling projects, or we are currently recycling wastewater out of all of those 4 plants. One of those, as you mentioned, is the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant. That is the biggest that LA San and Environment owns and operates. And that's where Operation Next will take place. And my apologies, I just kind of joked that you may have heard about it. We've been talking about it a lot, and we've put out a lot of press releases about it. But I am aware that some of our friends on the East Coast may not have heard us talk about it as much. But Operation Next is what we call our Mulholland moment, what we call our next aqueduct for the city, which would provide a large amount of advanced purified reclaimed water from Hyperion, and really use all the wastewater coming out of the Hyperion Water Reclamation Plant for drinking water purposes within the city. As of now, we're currently within the master planning process. You talked a little bit about DPR for Operation Next. Currently, within the state of California, we don't have final DPR regulations. So we are very engaged with the state, with a lot of the technical experts and the state's independent advisory panel to help develop those regulations. And as those regulations develop, they'll be folded into the master planning process to determine whether whether it will be DPR for Operation Next or some form of IPR similar to what the Groundwater Replenishment Project is doing. So there's those options for us right now being evaluated through the master planning process.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And like you said, it's a broad audience because we have folks across the country, but also folks around the world, and then students watching this. And so it's helpful just to kind of, clarify what those are. I know there's been lots of celebrations that have gone on in the Los Angeles area, even just in the past few weeks. So I know that a lot of folks are very well aware of these. One of the questions that is in there in the chat, but also just important to leave folks with, is the future, particularly the students, right? So what would be some of your advice for training up the next generation? What do they do so that they're savvy to be able to engage with stakeholders, to work with the public? Because this project has tremendous levels of technical competency, but communicating that technical competency in a way that the public understands, helping the public understand how you're protecting them from things that the science isn't even there yet to let us know what. I mean, we wouldn't have been talking about PFAS the same way 20 years ago as we are now, right? And so 20 years from now, they'll be the next thing. How do students prepare themselves, future professionals prepare themselves? How do young professionals continue to prepare themselves to be engaged in these projects that are technical, but also very much engaging the public as well?
I think you provided the answer in your question, Dan. I think it's important for the students to know more than any other engineering field within the civil engineering realm, within the water realm, everything that we do impacts the communities that we live in, and it's near and dear to everyone's hearts. So it's not just a technical problem. It's not just treat for this and send it out. We really have to make sure that the public understands and is comfortable with what we're doing. So really, the technical skills are important, but really refining our communication skills with our community, really keeping that in mind throughout our careers, that public engagement is important. Their trust is paramount. Without their trust, without their buy-in, we can't advance these projects and make these advances within the water field as we've been able to do over the past many years in Los Angeles. So that would be my biggest advice for the young professionals coming up, everyone in school. Michael is a little bit closer to school in his career. So Michael, if you have anything else that you do want to provide to the younger professionals, the students, please feel free.
Yeah, I think I would just add there's a lot of plants I feel like that have learning centers, and it's not really so much about reinventing the wheel. We can all learn from each other and learn from a lot of these past projects and how to communicate in non-technical terms. And really, it's not the kind of thing that you learn in school. You really just learn by doing. You learn by attending these kinds of presentations, making these kinds of presentations, and also just talking with your own circle about these kinds of topics. Whenever I'm at a dinner party, I swear I'm cornered for like an hour talking about water water topics, water treatment, water resources, all kinds of things. You know, here in California, it's a really big deal. But honestly, it's like the public is yearning to know and just doesn't really have somebody to provide good information. So honestly, you start in that circle and then it just builds up from there.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Andrew and Michael, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate all the effort you put into delivering a presentation that we could all understand. Please pass along our regards to Sebastian as well. I know he had to drop off for another. Before we formally wrap up, is there any other comments or any other words of wisdom you'd like to leave us with?
So similar to how we had ended the presentation, we're always looking to learn from the community. We're always looking to learn and collaborate with the industry. So please feel free to reach out. There's opportunities to learn at DCT in terms of what we're doing with the AWPF. We didn't talk about it too much, but we have a little space reserved for further studies and pilots. Please, definitely reach out with any advice you may have for us, any opportunities to collaborate. And thank you everyone for your time.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all again. So what we're going to do now is wrap up for this presentation. Thank you to Los Angeles Department of Water and Power for a fantastic presentation, and congratulations on winning the grand prize in planning for the Excellence in Environmental Engineering and Science competition. That is a fantastic recognition of an awesome project. With that, I will turn it back over to Marissa to close us out.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks everyone for all your questions, and thank you to our 3 speakers today for sharing your knowledge. If you have additional questions on this topic, please reach out to me and I'd be happy to put you in touch. We do have several webinars planned in the near future, so you can go to AAEES.org/events and you can reserve your spot there. Just a reminder, if you're not yet an AAEES member and you're considering joining the Academy, please email me and we can discuss our membership options. Also, the PDH certificates for this event will be sent out sometime this week. That's all for now. We enjoyed being with you all today. Thank you so much and have a great day.